What is the difference between a dual sport motorcycle and an adventure bike? Let me give you the 10th grade biology version. Basically, a dirt bike dad and a street bike mom meet and fall in love. After a while, they have baby bikes. The dual sport would mostly take after dad with many dominant dirt bike traits and a few of mama's street bike's features. The adventure bike, however, would take after mom with dominant street bike features and a few recessive dirt bike traits shining through. Before we jump in, I just want to say thanks to Cyclops Adventure Sports for sponsoring this video. We'll talk a little bit more about their cool-ass turn signals in a minute. I originally made a video on this topic in 2021, but as less than 10% of you were around back then, and my understanding and opinions and thoughts and expertise, such as it is, have changed and evolved over the years, I thought it might be worth revisiting because I still see the question all the time. If you want to watch me talk to the camera directly with absolutely no B-roll and an incredibly awesome echo because I'm sitting in my garage for 11 minutes, I'll link that video for you here. One important sort of basic tenet that we have to establish before we jump into the differences between dual sports and adventure bikes is the fact that an adventure bike is technically a dual sport, because a dual sport is just a motorcycle that does street and off pavement. ADV bikes are just a more specialized subcategory of dual sports, but in general, dual sport refers to the more off-roady and adventure bike refers to the more streety. The lines are blurry and there are tons of exceptions, so take nothing I say as a hard and fast rule. These are just general guidelines to help you understand what people mean when they say one or the other. Let's talk about what a dual sport motorcycle is. In general, because it takes after its dirt bike dad, the dual sport will have more dirt bike-like ergonomics and styling. They'll be off-road capable with smaller engines, often single cylinders. They'll have more ground clearance and suspension travel than an adventure bike, a smaller gas tank, and a dirt bike style seat, that is to say, one that you're meant to stand up more than you're meant to sit on. And generally, dual sports will come with spoked wheels because those are better for off-road, uneven terrain. Some examples of dual sports: my beloved CRF 300L, the new DRZ 4S, the Kawasaki KLX 300, the KTM 500 EXC series, the KLR 650, which has an important asterisk that we'll discuss, and the venerable classic granddaddy of them all, the DR650 from Suzuki. The advantages to dual sports, the pros of dual sports: they are lighter bikes almost across the board, they are easier to pick up, there are fewer body parts to break, the plastics are cheap to replace, they are street legal for connecting trails, which is great, versus a pure dirt bike, which if you get to the end of a trail and there's a road, you can't technically go on it. I'm sure you all obey that. Dual sports can take a beating without really even showing it. They have simple, reliable engines, they're narrower and easier to maneuver in tight spaces, way less expensive to buy and maintain than an adventure bike in general, and the insurance is unbelievably cheap by comparison. I pay 4 times or 5 times as much for my 790 Adventure a month than I do for my CRF 300L Rally. Disadvantages to dual sports versus adventure bikes: they have small tanks, as we mentioned, usually around 2 gallons. The seats are uncomfortable, plywood 2x4 like I would say. They have very few creature comforts. They're very buzzy at highway speeds owing to their single cylinderness. They're not great for freeway or highway rides. They're fine, you can do it, but it's not comfortable for that or made for that like an adventure bike is in general. Most dual sports have no wind protection, no windscreen, no fairings. Knobby tires on the dual sports can be squirrely on the road, and you will get blown around on the freeway or the highway when a semi passes in the other direction or there's just a strong wind, because they are lightweight bikes. They aren't as stable at higher speeds. They will struggle on the highway. Passing can be a challenge on dual sports. You really have to plan ahead for that kind of thing. And they're often lacking in basic safety features like ABS, and really almost none of them have ride modes or any of those other fancy electronics. Dual sports in general are better suited for things like technical forest roads. If you want to ride trails, particularly single track, you're better off on a dual sport than an adventure bike. Dual sport is great for when you're riding mostly off pavement, but you have some short on-road connections between trails or roads. And dual sports are great for people who want to mod the bike and make it their own. They're a great blank slate for customization. So if you want to take one and make it a super light trail bike, you can, but you can also take the same bike, add a gas tank, windscreen, and luggage racks to make it a more adventure-y style dual sport. Speaking of customizing and upgrading your dual sport or adventure bike, let me tell you about the best, most durable turn signals you can buy for either one. Finding electronics that'll stand up to the rigors and vibrations of successful off-road riding and the smashing impacts of less successful riding is a real challenge. Companies seem to use the cheapest possible options for turn signals, which may be fine for a street bike, but adventure and dual sport riders need more. Cyclops Tuff lights are the answer. No other company is going to ask you to smash their product as hard as you can with a bat. Yet Cyclops did exactly that at the Touratech rally last year. Tuff lights feature a spring-loaded stock to prevent damage from crashes and impacts with brush and trees along the trail. They bend 360 degrees but are stiff, durable, and nearly unbreakable. I have their lights on my 790 and they're awesome, a true upgrade from the stock blinkers in many ways beyond just the increased durability. The Tuff lights turn your turn signals into additional running lights on the front and rear brake lights for added visibility, and they're a ton brighter than your factory LEDs. Cyclops sells plug-and-play kits for most KTMs and Huskies and the Tenere 700. They also sell a generic kit with bullet connectors that'll work with just about any bike. No resistors required, and they have more bike-specific kits coming all the time. Tuff lights come with a 2-year warranty and come with the best customer service and installation advice in the industry because you can literally call or email Brian or Daryl directly for help if you need it. I watched Brian install mine on the 790 and it was as easy as removing the front plastic and plugging them into the existing connectors. Yes, it is so easy, even a dork could do it. Click the link in the description or just head over to cyclopsadventuresports.com. Make sure you use promo code DORK in the road to save 10% off your Tuff lights or any other product from their website. Daryl and Brian thoroughly test their products, mostly on their 890 adventures. They are top tier, amazing riders. I have great faith in their products and I think you'll be impressed with them too. Adventure bikes, on the other hand, generally have upright, more street bike ergonomics. They're very comfortable to sit on for long periods of time, better than most sport bikes and mini cruisers in my opinion. They have great road performance, they're built for that. They have larger engines with more power. They're generally a twin cylinder, although there are some notable triples like the Triumph Tiger. They are in general more difficult to ride off pavement because they are heavier and more top heavy, but they have more creature comforts like windscreens, comfy seats, heated grips, heated seats, cruise control, etc. And adventure bikes in general have more fuel capacity and range than dual sports. Some examples of adventure bikes are the BMW GS 1300, probably the classic, the one people think of when they think adventure bike, the KTM 890 and the 790, the Suzuki V-Strom, the Yamaha Tenere 700, and technically the 1200, and the Triumph Tiger series, as I mentioned. Pros or advantages of ADV bikes over dual sports. One, they are far more comfortable on the road. They're built to be. They have more comfortable seats, they have bigger engines, they have more wind protection, both in terms of windscreen and fairings to protect your lower body from the wind. The engines are better suited to sustained high RPMs. Adventure bikes will have larger and better brakes because the bike is heavier, and larger gas tanks, much larger in most cases, like double. Adventure bikes are more powerful, so they're fun to ride fast on the street and better for freeway riding because more passing power and there's more weight to keep you stable. They have bigger gas tanks for longer trips, better electronics, things like ride modes and cruise control, and ride modes can make up for lack of skill. In some areas they can save you if you get in over your head with things like traction and slide control like the KTM 790, 890, and the 390 that's coming out has. Disadvantages to adventure bikes versus dual sports: they're heavier, which means they are harder to maneuver, just like move it around your garage and like turn around on a gravel road, and they're harder to pick up, way harder in some cases. In general, you just want someone to help you, but you got to use a proper lifting technique with an adventure bike, where with a dual sport you can usually just grab the handlebars and pick it up. Adventure bikes are more expensive to buy and maintain. They require more skill to ride off-road. I had written down less capable. It's not necessarily the case because a lot of that depends on the rider, but they are much more difficult to ride well, particularly on difficult off-road. You need skill and commitment because they're heavy, but you have more power, so it can help with some of those things with moving the heavier bike along. You just have to commit. Adventure bikes need more protection mods because it is expensive to replace the fairings and body parts if you crash, and there are more electronics and systems, which means more potential failure points and more expensive repairs, and adventure bikes are more expensive and therefore much more expensive to insure. Adventure bikes are more well suited for things like riding a long distance to get to your destination than riding off-road. So if you have to go 7 hours to ride off-road for an hour, an adventure bike might be a great thing. Or if you're doing a multi-day trip where you ride for 6 hours every day on the road, do a couple hours of off-road, get back on the bike, ride 6 hours, an adventure bike is going to be a better choice for that because it's just going to be more comfortable. And adventure bikes are also better for just carrying a lot of gear. They have a lot more carrying capacity with the engine, stiffer suspensions, better brakes, and all of that. So if you want to take a lot of stuff, an adventure bike is the way to go. Now, there are exceptions for each side. Don't take all of that as hard and fast because it isn't. It's really a spectrum or a sliding scale between on-road and off-road capability. Both types of bikes can do some of both, but dual sports are generally better at off-road than ADV bikes, and adventure bikes are generally better on the road than dual sports. ADV bikes require skill and commitment when it comes to the gnarly terrain terrain. You can't just waddle your way through as much because they're heavy and momentum is more important. Fortunately, you also generally have more power, so if you're willing to put your feet on the pegs and go, you can still get through most anything. But the consequences for failure are much more severe. More expensive repairs, heavier bike to pick up, potential for injuries is higher because the bike is heavier when it falls on your leg. For this reason, dual sports are more beginner friendly and what I generally recommend learning to ride off-road on. Unless you want to do more than 50% street on the bike, you're better off starting with a dual sport if you want to learn to ride off pavement, in my opinion. Some dual sports will straddle the line or even cross into ADV bike territory. The KLR 650 is a great example. It's a thumper, but it has a lot of ADV bike traits like fairings and a bigger gas tank. So much so that I would call it more of an ADV bike than a dual sport. In general, any bike over 400 pounds is basically an ADV bike in my eyes. The Himalayan 450 is another great example. It's technically a single cylinder bike, but with its weight and electronic suite, it's more of an ADV bike than a dual sport to me. That's what it's intended to be. Now, there are bikes like the CRF 300L Rally, which is another example of one that kind of straddles the line because it has a fairing and a bigger tank. It's a light ADV bike in my opinion, but still has many of the disadvantages of smaller dual sports like lack of power and stability at highway speeds. With enough mods, many dual sports can be nudged over towards ADV categories, another gray area. A DR 650 or a KTM 690 with a windscreen, bigger tank, and panniers has most of the advantages of an ADV bike while retaining a lot of the off-road benefits of a dual sport. ADVentouring is another gray area, but is basically adventure bikes that have gone towards the street side with smaller front wheels and more on-road comfort at the expense of ground clearance, suspension, travel, and off-road capability. Some examples of what I would call ADVentouring bikes, less adventure, more streety, would include the Honda NX500 Versus 650, the Versus X300, etc., etc. So really the question is, how do you decide between the two? Start with the type of riding that you see yourself doing more often and go from there. Will you spend more time on the highway? Go adventure. Do you want to have the most off-road capable bike possible but not have to turn around when you hit a connecting road? Well, I would say go dual sport. Long distance adventure bike, close to home dual sport. You want to put it on the back of your RV or in the back of your truck or on your camper when you're going places and just have something to put around when you get there, I would say dual sport. But if you want to ride across the country and hit up some cool off-road destinations along the way, that is more adventure bike territory in my opinion. Ultimately, both types of bikes have their advantages and you can't really go wrong either way. No bike is forever and they hold their value pretty well. You can always trade it in or sell it and try the other type, and or, in my opinion, if you can swing it. The best combination is an ADV bike for long range travel and like going to places far afield and riding off-road, but also having a dual sport for stuff close to home and anywhere you can just throw it in the back of your truck and ride the off-road when you get there. So obviously the answer to should I get a dual sport or an adventure bike is yes, but if you have to choose between the two, think about what kind of riding you're going to do. Start from there. If you're looking for more dual sport and adventure advice, reviews, and shenanigans, please consider subscribing to the channel because I'm the dork in the road and I want to be your internet riding buddy. And I'm better than your regular riding buddies because I come with a mute button. Thank you for watching, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.
Excellent!